Hey everyone, this is Matt. Welcome back to the garage, and I finally got my brake booster in the mail, so it's time to go ahead and get that knocked out. So I've got the car up here on the lift, and I think this is going to be pretty painful with the dash in the car, even on the lift where I can see everything, just trying to reach your arms up in there and trying to get that. There's basically detaching the booster from the brake pedal and then the 4 bolts that actually mount it to the firewall. That really won't be the issue. It's really trying to get the pin and the clevis and all that stuff off the brake pedal, but hopefully we'll work through it. I'm going to take some of the lower dash trim pieces off, and hopefully that helps. Having the car on a lift will make it a little bit challenging as well, because the arms for the lift and stuff are going to kind of be in the way. So anyway, I'll show you what I'm looking at, and we'll just get right into it. So here we are underneath the dash, and so really the brake booster is going to be hard to see from this angle, but the brake pedal just attaches right up there to the booster. There's 4 bolts. All that's actually relatively easy to see. The hard thing is the clevis that attaches to the brake pedal. I think for the ease of just having a little bit more room to get my arms in there, I'm going to take off this lower dash trim, this kick panel, and just try to get a few things out of my way, because with the car on the lift, the arms are going to be in the way, and I'll have to kind of reach over there and kind of stand in awkward spots to get to it. I could put the wheels back on the car and just lower this down and deal with it on the ground, but up here might be able to access a little bit more. So really getting that pin and clevis off the brake pedal, and then getting the 4 bolts off for the actual booster, not too bad. So I'm gonna go grab some tools. Looks like we're just gonna need some Phillips head screwdrivers, and I'm gonna start pulling this trim off. So I think this is about as good of a angle I'm going to be able to get on camera. And the 2 nuts that you see kind of up there in the center of the screen, there's 2 more on the right hand side. And then hopefully you can kind of see the rod that comes through and connects to the back of the brake pedal. So there's a pin on the opposite side, which I'll never be able to show you because of the steering column. But we need to get that pin off, and then that clevis will basically come free of the pedal. Then we can take those 4 bolts off and pull the booster out from the engine bay. The booster feels oddly heavy. Yeah, I don't think that's supposed to be in there. So, yeah, I'm glad I went ahead and thought about replacing this. Like I said, pretty much just as expensive to get a rebuilt brake booster as opposed to rebuilding it yourself. So, save yourself the headache and just get the rebuilt ones. I do need to reuse the clevis that's on the back of the booster, and of course my arm's in the way, but I need to get that off. And then I've got the other booster sitting right here. So let me go ahead and get that out and get this clevis off. So you'll have to reuse the flange from your factory booster. I just spent a little time cleaning mine up. Mine had lots of caulk and sealant on it. I have no idea. Got it cleaned up, just scuffed it a little bit. I didn't go super crazy about polishing it. And I didn't mention earlier, but before I took this off, this clevis off, I had taken a reference measurement from the surface that mounts against the firewall out to the center of the clevis, and mine was almost exactly 5.5 inches. It was just a hair under. So when I set this one up, I made sure to set it exactly the same. Now that doesn't mean there won't be any further adjustments, but that should get us in the ballpark. We'll need to check brake sensor lights and brake travel and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that got set based off my previous measurement, and then based off the factory service manual, the little pin that push rod that goes into the master cylinder, it's supposed to be approximately 10 millimeters. So I think that it's like 9.75 to 10 millimeters off the face of this flange. So I've got my square here set to 10 millimeters, and I've got quite a ways to go. So I think what I'm going to do is just go ahead and unthread this out a little bit so that I can access this little nut, and I'll go ahead and tighten that in, and then tighten this back in. Looks like I'm just a little bit high. Just a little bit low, so that range is very small. I mean, 1/4 of a millimeter. Of course, there's probably better tools to do this than a square, but it's what I've got, and it'll get us good enough. All right, so I have that set just a hair, not even a hair, like half a hair under 10 millimeters. So I think we're going to be within spec. So there'll still be a little bit of trial and error when we install this in the car. I'll have to push this through the firewall and probably lightly bolt it, see how things are lining up with the clevis, and get it tightened down. And then ultimately, once the master cylinder is installed, we'll have another step of checking to make sure everything's engaging properly. But yeah, so this is ready to go back in the car. So I'm gonna go wipe down the firewall. It was pretty clean, but just go ahead and make sure it's nice and clean anyway, and then go ahead and set this in. I've been sitting here looking at the booster and trying to get it roughly fit back into the firewall, and I've come to the conclusion that when this was made, they installed the back plate upside down. So it's not the end of the world. If I had the right tools, I could carefully spin this 180 degrees so that the vacuum line is in the bottom right corner if you're looking at the front of the car. But because I don't have the tools to do that, and I really don't want to get into it too much, I am going to install it what will look like it's upside down, but it's really just this this outside housing is upside down. Everything else will be the right side up. And then I think the vacuum line will just have to reach over a little bit different, but it does make a difference because the spacing of the studs are offset more towards the top. So it'll look upside down when I'm done, and maybe one day if I'm feeling up to it, I'll get the right tools to try to separate this and spin it around. But I think for what I'm trying to do now, looking like it's backwards will be totally fine. The master cylinder will fit just fine, so shouldn't be too much of an issue. So I will feed this back through the firewall. If you had a second person, they could be on the inside making sure the clevis goes over the brake pedal. But it's just me out here today. So I'm gonna push this through, make sure I don't have any like crazy resistance trying to push it in. And I'm just gonna use a bungee to kind of hold it in place. And then I'll go around and check and see how everything's lining up. We'll go ahead and put this in. And again, just pretend it's the right side up. Anybody that owns a Datsun knows that every Datsun is built just a little bit different, and sometimes parts, even if they're OEM or whatever, sometimes they just don't fit. And I think with this brake booster, It could have been that it was off just a little bit when they fabricated it, or the thickness of the powder coating, but it was, you know, the top of it is, it's like when you look at the hole in the firewall and the hole where the push rod comes through, it's kind of offset towards the top. So I just barely filed down the firewall, just because that was going to be easier than trying to modify the brake booster. So it's in there now. You know, a little bit of play, a little bit of wiggle room. I went ahead and greased up everything so that, you know, hopefully seals up and not have any rust issues or anything like that. And I'm going to go back inside the car now, make sure everything's lined up there, get the car lifted up, and then start tightening down the 4 nuts that hold on the booster, and then get that pin in on the brake pedal. So that was a huge pain in the nuts, but I did get it installed. And again, the 2 bolts on the left-hand side, super easy to get to. The other 2, you can only feel them, you can't see them. So a ratcheting box wrench, that is really the best tool to get those on and off. I've got this little tiny finger ratchet, and this one particularly has kind of like, you know, points on it so that you can really grip it. So this thing was a lifesaver because, you know, once you get the nut loose, it's got about a 1/2 inch of threads you got to get off. And of course, like, you know, mine were a little bit dirty, so they couldn't just easily twist off by finger, and yours might. But this little guy, you can get on there, get tons of leverage. So I use this to install it as well and loosen it. But the other trick is getting the cotter pin for the clevis that attaches to the brake pedal. So you're going to hold that with a long nose, needle nose pliers, and then I use this little mirror to look straight up so I could align that. But you could also do it by feel, but the mirror helped a ton. So other than that, it's just really having patience and taking your time. So now it's time to get the master cylinder in, and my battery's about to die, so let's go ahead and get back in the engine bay. So they're pretty readily available if you want to get yourself a new master cylinder. I just went with an OEM. Well, this isn't OEM master cylinder, but I went with OEM setup. So 7/8 inch lines and what have you. I didn't upgrade to 1 inch or anything like that. So fairly cheap to get a new master cylinder as opposed to trying to rebuild the one you have, which is always an option, but definitely more of a pain in the butt to have to deal with. Plus, this is just completely fresh and easy just to install. So I really don't need to do anything with this. I will put a little bit of grease in the end where the push rod pushes through. And I was curious if the factory caps would fit on here. I mean, everything looks fairly much, you know, just the same as the ones I took off. So yeah, it does look like if you wanted to, you could try to reuse the factory caps that have the floats. One of mine is in good condition. The other one, the seal is broken. So I don't know if I'd be able to pull the seal. Looks like they're a little bit different, but you know, this seal is chewed up. So I think for now, I'm just gonna run the caps that it came with, and eventually one day either get the floats or just disable the floats, rewire that. So I'm going to use the hardware that came with the brake booster to install this. Fingers crossed this actually just fits on the car and we don't have a ton of problems. But I do also need to go ahead and get the brake line, which I pulled off, reinstalled, and make sure we're ready to get the other brake line in the car attached, make sure they're clean. So I'll go ahead and clean those up real quick, and then we'll check in when I go to install this. So I went ahead and pulled off the little rubber plugs that go in the bottom of the new brake master, and I've got the new hardware. So I've got the lines down here ready to go. I will go ahead and try to fish this on. And then I'll put the top lock nut and washer in. And on both these, I'm just going to tighten them a little bit. I'm not going to go too crazy right now because I want to go ahead and get the brake lines reattached, make sure I'm not going to have any issues there, but I will get these sort of tightened. All right, so now the tricky part is going to be trying to fish the brake lines up, and they're going to need a little bit of pressure to hold them, and then use a flare nut wrench 10 mil to go ahead and tighten those up. So today felt like that meme that everybody sees where it's like, I'm gonna go out from my garage for 1 hour and then like 12 hours later you come back inside. So, you know, the difficulty of getting this booster in, having to modify the firewall a little bit just to get that to fit, the challenges of reaching the nuts that go onto that through the firewall. Again, if my car wasn't on my lift and I didn't have the dash in, easy breezy, but with the dash in, it's not too difficult. If your nuts are rusty, I can imagine that's super difficult, but mine were in good shape and hopefully yours are too. But so the vacuum line is not ideal. It does kind of sit here on top of the reservoir, but I've checked all the lines. Everything seems to be tight, and I do need to put that shield back in, but I'm gonna leave it off for now because I need to bleed the system, and that'll help me see what I got going on, and just in case I do have an issue. So everything's in. I feel pretty good about that, but it's gotten late. I need to go grab some dinner. So I think the next thing I'm gonna do is put some fluid in both these reservoirs and just kind of let it percolate through the system a little bit, and then kind of do a little bit of a gravity bleed. Just make sure I'm getting fluid out to all 4 corners, and then we'll do a full bleed after that. But yeah, everything I've touched with regards to the brake system on this car, nothing worked. So really the only thing that's original at this point is the hard lines and you know, the kind of the rear drums, but everything inside the drums is new. But so hopefully that fixes all that. This vacuum line looks like it's in good shape, so I'm just going to leave it alone. Like I said, eventually maybe get modify this and get a shorter one that just can run up to there and not loop around like this. I'll put links to some of this stuff down in the description as I found it. That little finger ratchet will be down there because I found so many little uses for that thing. It's pretty handy to have. So I'll put an Amazon link down in the description for you to go find that. So yeah, next thing is to top this off with some brake fluid and get these brakes bled, and we can see if we've fixed all the issues with the braking system.